Our topic this evening is abortion in Jewish law with some reference to comparative law. I'm going to begin with source number 1, which is on line 3, page number 1, which is the one pasuk, the one verse in the Torah that may address killing a fetus in a direct fashion. And the Torah in the book of Shemot, as you'll see, says that if men fight and a pregnant woman is struck and she miscarries, but there is no fatality. The Hebrew word for fatality is ason. Im lo yiyeh ason. Then the striker is to be punished as the husband of the woman shall cause to be assessed against him. No fatality. The husband has to pay. What is he paying for? He struck a pregnant woman. She miscarried. But fatality presumably would be hers. There was no fatality. She did not die. Therefore, the only result was the killing of the fetus. And for that, the striker has to pay money. No crime, no criminal punishment. But if there is a fatality, im yihiyeh ason, then v'natata nefesh tachat nafesh. Then the rule of capital punishment applies in the same way that if one had killed a person, one would have to pay under biblical law with one's life. Now, how do I know that we're talking about a deliberate act of striking? The nagfu is the phrase used. And if we look at Josephus says ki yiv'at. In Greek, if you will kick. And kicking presumably is an intentional act. So in terms of its historical context, there is an intentionality involved here. Though one intentionally killed a fetus, there is no criminal sanction or punishment. And if we compare this with the ancient biblical codes of the period, the Babylonian code, for example, Hammurabi, which was composed 400 years before the Torah, okay? Yehuda Levi takes up the point and says, don't worry, the civil code is a human code that applies across all peoples. So it doesn't matter what period of history it may have been written down. The Babylonian laws are very clear. 8. If men strive together, strike a pregnant woman, and she loses her fetus, the striker shall pay 10 shekels compensation. That's how much a fetus was worth in ancient Babylon. If a woman dies, then the striker's daughter shall be put to death. It's capital punishment, but in Hammurabi, it's different. There are all sorts of variations. Why would it be that we have this scenario of a woman being kicked on her belly when she's pregnant by an angry man, both in the Torah and in the Babylonian laws and in the Akkadian laws and in the Assyrian laws? The historians suggest that in those days women worked from sunrise to sunset in the fields with their husbands, and when a fight arose and there was a jealousy and it burst into violence, the women were also subject to attack. Because if you carried a fetus, you carried the future of the family. This is a farmer. This is a soldier. They didn't know the gender, of course, but you have to pay compensation because you have deprived that family or that clan of a farmer and a soldier. So the biblical picture seems to be very clear. What is interesting, though, is that, and this is a point of ancient comparative law. Where is Sarah the lawyer? Right there, trying to hide, but you have not succeeded. Okay, you are in my sights. Now, if we look at the Greek translation of the Torah, and let's turn to page 4, if you want to follow me. Line 6 on page 4. This is the Septuagint. Remember, 70 sages of Israel were convened by King Ptolemy of Hellenistic Egypt to translate the Torah into Greek. And they did so. The Talmud celebrates the fact that, on the one hand, they made necessary changes. There was a rather insulting word in the Bible, which was the same as the queen. So they changed that. And they changed it across the board. but it was declared to be a day of mourning, because when you change the language, you change meaning. You can't help it. And you do something, and it's not understood in the same way as the original author, in this case with a capital A, wanted you to understand. But look at the Septuagint. This is an excellent example of the Septuagint deviating from the text of the Torah. Remember what I said, ason, fatality, right through the book of Bereshit. If the word ason is used, it means somebody dies. Who dies in Bereshit, and his father says, I don't want him to die, he uses the word ason. Pen nikraenu ason Binyamin. I'm not going to let Binyamin go down to Egypt, says Yaakov to the brothers. Pen hikraenu ason, lest he die. So the word ason is a fatality, and it means an adult being killed or dying. Now look what the Septuagint does. Men strive together and strike a pregnant woman, and she loses her fetus, but it is not yet formed. Exe konisemon. You'll see the word icon in there. Yeah, exactly. That is the Greek word that is used when we translate Selen Elohim, God's image, into Greek. But Ason and Selen are two different things. Selen Elohim is indeed an image of God, but Ason is a fatality when an adult being dies. The striker shall surely be found in accordance with the psalm laid upon him by the woman's husband, and he shall pay according as the fetus is formed. Then a life is given for a life. You see how the Septuagint has translated into a completely different sense. Whereas the Torah, the Hebrew Torah, says that if you kill an adult born person, it's murder or homicide, and you have to pay the price. If you kill a fetus, it is at the most a tort. That is, you pay compensation. Demei vladot, as we say in Talmudic language. Because you've deprived the family of a future soldier or farmer. The Septuagint brings in a concept of the formed fetus as against the unformed fetus. If the fetus is fully formed inside the womb, in utero, then it is considered to be a capital offense. But if it is unformed, it hasn't yet gotten its icon, then it is not a capital offense, then you shall pay. A whole different idea introduced into the Hebrew text. Why did the Greeks do it? Or why did the rabbis who were translating into Greek, if they were, change the meaning? Because they were sensitive to their audience. Ptolemy, Alexandrian, Hellenist Greece. We're talking about a society that is very much into the morality and immorality of fetuses who are perceived to be living within the womb. Now, if it's a living being within the womb, surely it should be protected. On the other hand, it's not really a fully living being, it's only a potential being. You can't see it, you don't know whether it communicates. There is a clear, evident difference between a fetus and a child that has emerged from the womb. So the Greeks compromised, and they said there must be some point, because they were biologists and scientists as well. And if you look at Aristotle, he says, if however a larger number of children, 9, 10, are born to parents than is permitted by the law, the Greeks had family planning, you weren't allowed to have more than X amount of children, then abortion should be procured before the fetus has acquired sensation. You can abort, but only before the fetus has become formed or acquired sensation. If it's sensate, it responds and it moves. For the morality of abortion depends upon whether or not the fetus has acquired sensation. Aristotle brings a Greek view that says it would be inconceivable morally to kill a fetus after a certain stage of development in the womb. We then find that is transported into a Greek translation of the Torah. Okay? So translation changed history and changed law. From that mistranslation, if you like, Christianity, did Christianity speak mainly to Jews or to non-Jews, to Gentiles? Where did Christianity gain most of its adherents?
From the Greeks.
From the Greeks, from the pagans. Epistle to the Romans of Paul. He didn't write to Jews.
Yeah.
He made Christianity popular because he wrote to non-Jews, to pagans. And pagans, influenced by Aristotle, would have thought it highly immoral for somebody to think that if you kill a fetus after it's become formed, or after it has sensation, this is not a crime. Told you, it is a crime. And therefore the Torah, when you're speaking to a Greek audience who was at the interface of Judaism and Christianity and paganism, you want to make a good showing, and you want to make it morally acceptable. So you change the meaning of words. Change the meaning of words. We do it, by the way, all the time. If you look at English translations of the Torah, there's an embarrassing passage. You might find it slightly translated wrongly or differently, because when we're translating, we're speaking to the audience. And it is from this that Augustine, if you have a look at line 12, the law does not provide that the act of feticide in relation to a fetus lacking sensation is homicide. If your fetus, I am on line 13, if your fetus does not have sensation, it doesn't move, then it's not murder. But if it does move, then it is murder. And which church regards killing a fetus that has assumed a form as murder? Begins with a C and it's not Calvin. Catholic, thank you. Catholic Church. But look, originally the Catholic Church accepted the distinction between the formed fetus and the unformed fetus. Thomas Aquinas says that how do we judge whether a fetus is formed or has sensation? You feel it. Does it move? And what term do we use in English law for a fetus that moves in the womb? We say a mother is what with child? Word beginning with Q, ending in K.
Quick.
Quick. Exactly. Quick with child. That is if it has a movement. And in England, there was a quickening jury. What was a quickening jury? In the old days, when they hung people for the slightest offence, stealing a penny, if you had a pregnant woman who was accused and found guilty of theft, would you hang her? Well, you would if the fetus was not quick. So they brought 12 women, 12 stout and true matrons from the country, lay their hands on the woman's belly, they could feel a movement, then she was shipped to Australia, where the English sent all their criminals that they didn't hang. But if she was not quick with child, she was hung. Quickening becomes the basis not only of the Catholic approach, it becomes the basis for the common law. Okay? England, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America. And to this day, the issue of quickening lies at the heart of the abortion debate. Are we okay?
No, so
Yeah.
sensation you translate into movement.
Movement, yeah.
It doesn't mean sensing?
Sensing and sensation and movement are similar. You are sensate if you move. But of course, we're not expecting you to be able to understand the Bach cantata exactly. But movement is the basic sign of life. Think about it. Across the entire biological world, anything that moves is alive. If it stops moving, not good. So that is the idea. There are different words, Greek and Latin, but the idea of quickening is used over and over again until this year. The famous case of Dobbs against Jackson, you may have heard, at the Supreme Court of the United States. Yes, Claudia?
We have a language problem. Quickening in German is abortion, is the same?
No. Quickening is movement. How do you say movement in German? Bewegung. Okay, man darf haben Bewegung. All right, to mix my languages. If the fetus moves, then it is like you were killing a person. And there we have a link between Aristotle, pagan Greek, where they link with Christianity, Catholic Church, and the common law as it was practiced in the Middle Ages. And what is interesting and fascinating from a historical perspective, without even having gotten to abortion in Jewish law yet, okay, is to see how the Protestants, and you live in a Protestant town, Calvin, Zwingli, okay, the Protestants attacked the Catholic Church, Martin Luther, sola scriptum. One of the reasons for the attack was that the Catholic Church did not read the Bible, the Old Testament, in Hebrew. So the Protestants learned Hebrew. And they said, you Catholics have got it all wrong. And see how one of the English common law professors of law, okay, uses the original Hebrew text to say the Catholic Church has got it all wrong. And here I'm going to cite from William Hawkins, a treatise on the pleas of the crown, line number 15. And it was anciently holden. Actually, I will just tell you, please read as I talk. Hawkins says, of course killing a fetus is not murder. Those who think that it is if the fetus is formed or is quickened are making a mistake because they've read the Greek translation of the Bible. The Catholics read Greek. We Protestants, what do we read? Hebrew. And we know what it really means. There's no murder at any stage of fetal life. Yes?
But what is the reason of the Greek that they made this distinction between
The Greeks believed very much in biology. And they said, if you have movement, you are alive. And it's as simple as that. And therefore their morality, as it said, you read from Aristotle, Plato too, their morality said, just as today, those who support a ban on abortion say you're taking a life. There's no difference between. But there is a difference, so the compromise. And the compromise, of course, was made by the United States in its 1973 case of Roe against Wade. Claudia, correct?
Yeah.
Are you with me? In spite of the language.
Yes.
The United States Supreme Court in 1973 says, you know what? It's okay to kill a fetus before we get to a certain stage. After that, there is a problem. And what happened this year was that the court said it's never okay to kill a fetus at any stage. Because the judges are now, some are Catholic, some are Republican, and there's a very strong feeling that all fetal life, this goes back to Greeks and to the Catholic Church, is sacred and cannot be taken. And what Roe did was it misread the history. It also indulged in wrong translation. For example, the Roe against Wade court held the reason why in the old days abortion was a crime was not to protect the fetus, it was to protect who? The mother from a bad abortionist who was likely to kill her. But today abortion is very safe, so there shouldn't be a problem. That's absolutely wrong. American law originally prohibited feticide because it was driven by morality and said you cannot kill until a certain stage. And quickening occurs in this decision this year. January, Dobbs against Dobbs against Jackson. The famous case that has set America on fire. Okay? So it's a very emotive issue. And what I've shown you in this short diversion into legal history is, I think, fascinating. From the Torah to the Greeks to the Christians. And by the way, very important, what happened in 1869? I will tell you. The Pope said, 1869, the distinction between a fetus that is formed and unformed, quick or not quick, is a dangerous one. Why is it a dangerous distinction? A nun becomes pregnant, not good, wants to do away with her fetus, has an abortion. They come to her and say, when they've heard about the abortion. How could you have an abortion? It's a terrible crime. What could she say?
I didn't feel a sensation.
I didn't feel a sensation. The fetus wasn't quick. I may be a sinner, but I'm not such a big sinner. So the Pope said, I don't trust you nuns anymore. From now on, no fetus ever is to be touched, even if the mother's life, even if the mother will die. Even if the mother will die. This is the Catholic position. Stand back and let God do what he wants to. This is, rather than take a life of a human being, and the fetus is a human being. So having said that,
you mentioned the Septuaginta, the Greek.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, the Greek translation. Now, this was obviously written after Torah, so there was a development, there was understanding. What interests me, what did parallel to that, the Talmud, our tradition.
That's what we're going to do now.
So
Let's read. Let's move. Okay. Back to the Talmud. Back to page 1, section 2, line 11. The Mishnah, 2nd century, okay, after the Septuagint, says as follows. Our Jewish Mishnah says, what happens in the old days, 2nd century, if a woman is giving birth, birth has started, and the fetus is stuck. It's not going anywhere. What is the law? You probably know.
Catholic Church.
No, the Jewish church. The Talmud. What does the Mishnah say? Save the mother. We will kill the fetus. You'll see the Mishnah. We have to cut up the fetus and take it out limb by limb. Why? The mother's life, as we learned from the pasuk in the Torah, Ason, is a real full life. Fetus is not. But once the majority has emerged, en dochin nefesh mipnei nefesh, says the Mishnah, we may not prefer one full being to another full being. When do we become a nefesh, a full being? In the eyes of the law, when we are born, we come out of the womb, we have an existence independent of our mother. Can somebody translate that quickly into Schweizerdeutsch? Existence independent of the mother.
I don't know Schweizerdeutsch.
Do you know any Deutsch? Do I have any volunteers?
You can speak in German.
German.
It seems to me that the Gemara says something else. She didn't say because it's a lesser life and a better life. It's because the child is a rodef.
Just a second. Okay, I will get to your point as well. That's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara and the Mishnah simply say, and you can see, and you wouldn't like to argue with Rashi. Well, you can if you want. If you're the Rambam, and you just cited the view of the Rambam, which we're going to get to. Now, Rashi gives the interpretation, line 16, the do you see that?
Yeah.
If it's not independent of the mother, it's not a nefesh. V'nitan lo horgo, and you can kill it k'dei latzil et imo. אבל יצא ראשו אין נוגעים בו להורגו דהווה לקהילות ואין דוחי נפש מפני נפש. So you're clearly not understanding the Mishnah according to Rashi. And if we read the Sema, Rabbi Joshua Falkatz, 1555 to 1614 in Poland, he connects the pasuk in Shemot with the ruling in the Mishnah. And he says, of course it makes sense that according to our Michael Rabbinic Talmudic law, we read in the book of Shemot that if a man strikes a woman intentionally and causes the fetus to die, what does he have to pay? 10 shekels. According to Hammurabi, it's a monetary offense, not a crime. And that's why when the mother's life is in danger, we kill the fetus, even if it's during birth. And that was when fetuses were killed in the old days. Okay, they didn't have the ability that we have today to solve the problem. They were stuck in every sense of the word. Mother, fetus, and anybody around trying to figure out what ought to be done. And this is what the Sama says, writing in the 16th century, it's commentary. He says, as long as it is in her womb, the fetus may be dismembered even though it is alive. Even though it is alive. The rabbis knew that the fetus was alive. In other words, by then, they understood the biology, but it didn't have a legal status of a nefesh, of a full human being. There's a difference between biological life and legal and moral status. For as long as it has not yet emerged into the world, it is not called a nefesh. And the proof is the biblical law regarding the payment of miscarriage money, the mevladot, according to which the striker pays compensation, but is not considered a, what's the next word? Murderer. And is not liable to capital punishment. But of course you will immediately say, but the Mishnah gives us a concrete case. What's the case in the Mishnah? The mother is going to die unless you kill the fetus. So the Mishnah shouldn't be understood as saying, well, because the fetus is not a nefesh, if I see a pregnant woman walking on the Bahnhofstrasse, I just give her a kick. And it doesn't matter under Jewish law. Of course it matters. There's an understanding implicit in the Mishnah that you only use the non-nefesh status of a fetus when you are balancing one life against the other. Mother's life is a supreme value. Fetal life is a value, but not the same level as the mother, and therefore the mother comes first. But it doesn't mean that you can go around killing fetuses left, right, and center whenever the feeling comes over you. Okay? Now, but let's see this moral idea come out in the Talmud. We'll get to the Rambam shortly. Okay? Now, there's another Gemara in section 3, beginning on line 26, that is rather odd. It says that, now Jewish law has this idea that all of humankind has to keep certain moral laws. And everybody should have it in their law. And one of those things is not to kill a fetus. But that's for the B'nai Noach, the world at large. Because it's learned from a pasuk in Bereshit chapter 9 that says, Shofet dam ha'adam ba'adam damoni shofet. Anyhow, playing with that verse, the way you put the comma, Rabbi Ishmael says, if you kill a man within a man, and who is a man inside a man? A fetus, then it is bloodshed. Now, first of all, that's not the law, as we apply it, because the Mishnah and the Gemara are very clear. But it does provide the basis for a feeling that even though an ubar is not a nefesh, you should still be very careful about treating it as a living being and not killing it for nothing. Why Rabbi Ishmael, and why did he say this? And why is he talking about the non-Jewish world? The answer may be, and this is what the historians suggest, Rabbi Ishmael went with other rabbis to Rome. There was always traffic between Jerusalem and Rome, and what did he see in Rome? Sexual immorality and abortions. They were widely practiced in the first century, and the rabbi came to Rome and he said, oy vey, terrible thing, okay? So he went back and he wrote in his Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael that the moral law of humanity at large, and then Noah includes a prohibition on killing a fetus. But it's for them, not for us. We Jews can go ahead and kill a fetus, but when we're saving the mother's life. But there, in the big wide world in Rome, they're having abortions all the time so that they can continue with their sex life, their immoral way of living. This is the period of the moral corruption of the Roman Empire. That may be the reason, but what can we learn from that? We learn, interestingly enough, that anything which is forbidden to the non-Jews should be forbidden to us. Because are we at a lower moral standard? Surely we should be at a higher moral standard. That's what the Gemara says. And then the Tosafot says, yes, the truth is that we Jews only kill a fetus if it's a direct threat to the mother's life. And the point of Rabbi Ishmael is that we should never ever think about killing fetuses for anything other than saving the mother's life. And you know what, say the Tosafot in the Middle Ages, if a non-Jew has to kill a fetus to save the mother's life, that is kosher and okay as well. So what we have here is, on the one hand, the law. The law is very clear. A fetus is not a human being for the sake of the law, for the crime of murder until the fetus comes out of the womb and has an existence independent of its mother. But we have the moral law, and this is always the case with halakha. It has more than one dimension. Okay, it has a legal one, and it has, I don't mean dimension, I mean dimension. Okay, it always has a moral envelope around it, and that's why the Mishnah puts the permission to kill a fetus in the envelope of Sarah, a threat to the life of the mother. That's when you can kill a fetus, but not for anything else. Now the Rambam comes in with a totally original idea. Not in the Gemara, not anywhere. He's the only one, as we'll see shortly, from the mouth of a Swiss rabbi, at least Swiss at the end of his life. And you can guess who it is, perhaps. Okay? But Rambam says, you know what? There is a concept in Jewish law, turnover, called rodef. What is rodef? If somebody is running after somebody else and wants to kill them, then any bystander can step up and save the life of the innocent person who is being pursued. Okay? But you have to be very sure that the man who is about to kill the one who's running away from him is a murderer with intent to kill. Because if you make a mistake, you will be a murderer. Okay? And it has to be a direct threat. In other words, you see, let's say for the sake of, you see Peter with a knife running after Heidi, about to put the knife in her back. And then Grandpa, who is a tzaddik, takes out his whatever he has, and he stops Peter from killing Heidi, okay? But you can only do that as a private person. That's the din rodef, as a private person. If it is absolutely clear that Peter is an immediate threat to the life of Heidi. Okay? No other situation does rodef apply. Okay. Now the Rambam says something that's really very odd. He says, and you know what? Killing the fetus, to say the mother, is the din of rodef. In other words, the fetus is a rodef. But why would you think that? The din of rodef applies when Peter plans, wants, and clearly intends to kill Heidi. Does a fetus intend to kill its mother by getting stuck in the birth canal?
No.
No. And then the Rambam makes an even more serious, apparently mistake. He says that once the head of the fetus has emerged, line 5 on page 2, it may not be touched because one life shall not be sacrificed for another. Don't touch the fetus once the head... But if it is a rodef, once a rodef, always a rodef. Why should you stop? Why should birth make a difference? So 2 questions. Schwere Kasches, as they say in Schweizerdeutsch. Okay? Now, and these questions have been asked over and over again, and various answers have been given. They're all pretty schwach, as we say again in Schweizerdeutsch, okay? And I'm going to let you speak in 1 second. The best approach to this is that Rambam is trying to identify cases in which you are allowed to make a decision about sacrificing one thing for the sake of another thing, even though there is no intention and it will still be right according to Jewish law. The Rambam is really extra, but you can see that Rashi and the Mishnah are correct, because what's the critical point? Birth. Before birth, you can say it is a rodef. After birth, you can't touch the fetus. So it can't be because of rodef only. It has to be rodef and birth. Okay? birth, before birth, you can apply the din of rodef, and the Rambam wants to tell you that even though the fetus has no intention to kill its mother, so why should you kill the fetus? The answer is that this is a rodef type situation. And remember, the Rambam says in Hebrew, and you have to notice very carefully, he uses a kaf. And he says, Mipnei, line 39 on page 1, Mipnei shehu rodef. What does that kaf mean? What's the kaf mean? Light. Exactly. Kaf hadinyon, light. It's not a real rodef. There's no intention. It is like rodef. Okay, you wanted to say something. I've answered the question. Thank you. That's good.
No,
Okay,
but
so
there is no intention, but if the situation is such that surely the life of the mother is in danger, it's as if it's an intention.
exactly. That's what the Rambam is doing.
Yeah.
The Rambam probably has a difficulty why the Mishnah just says, so, why? We don't know
I
why.
think it's what this gentleman said. Your name is?
Marcel.
Marcel. Okay, so Marcel Adi, he told us that Rambam is giving a more sophisticated approach.
Right.
He's more sensitive to life, and he wants you to think in terms of it, rodef, that there has to be some type of reason that weighs the balance against the fetus. The fetus has created an objective situation without intending to, that endangers the life of the mother, and therefore you can kill the fetus, even though there's no intention. That's the chiddush in the Rambam. Do you see that now?
No.
But does he explain the definition?
Sorry?
You can never kill somebody if he has no intention.
Well,
Strange thing.
the Rambam is saying that the case of the fetus is, because it is what a later rabbi called rodef ba'ones. You can have a rodef even though it is only objective with no intention.
Therefore, this is a very difficult concept, and we don't know what the halakha is actually.
Well, the halakha is delicate, but it will be what fits the situation. I'll remind you, how much time do I really have? Okay? Because, okay, fine. Let me take you to 1942. We are in a bunker in a ghetto in Lithuania. And there's a group of Jews hiding from the Gestapo who are doing an action. They're cleaning out all the Jews to the Umschaltplatz and from there to the death camp. A group of Jews are hiding in a bunker. You know what a bunker is?
Yeah.
And there's a baby there who's crying. Baby's crying. Gestapo, the SS will hear the baby's cries. You know this case. They will find the Jews and they'll be sent to their deaths. Somebody, a man, takes a blanket or a rag, stuffs it into the baby's mouth. Okay? Quiet. The Gestapo, the SS leave, and they take the rag out. The baby is dead. It's basically suffocated. Now, what is the halakha in a situation like this? Would you have saved the entire group by putting the baby's life in danger, or said, no, we can't touch the baby, and therefore the whole group would have been discovered and taken to the deaths? This is the type of case where the Rambam comes in. Rambam will say, rodef ba'ones. There are cases in which you are responsible for the death of a higher form of life, whether it's a number of people or an adult, okay? And you can therefore, in this type of extreme situation, say, mutar lecha. You are allowed to take or put the life of the baby in danger, okay, in order to save the entire group. And the Rabbi Shimon Ephrati, in his response to Migei HaHariga Siman Aleph, the Valley of Death, number 1, says that the Rambam's rodef ba'ones, objective rodef, not subjective, no intention, non-intentional rodef, is and may be neutralized, to use a neutral term, may be killed in order to save the life of a group or of an adult in the case of
It should be the same
the
law.
mother.
When the head is out, then it should be exactly the same law.
Exactly, but no, because you say in order to kill you need two things. You need rodef ba'ones, and it is not a full human being. When you have those two, then you can say rodef ba'ones. And the Rambam is doing that. It's a fetus, it's an objective situation where you're going to do the greater good in terms of saving life. Jewish law allows you to make a decision, but you need to take responsibility from it. The Rambam says, "Ve'en morin lahem ken milekatchila." You have to take responsibility morally for what you are doing, but you do have a halachic backing. So that is the chidush of the Rambam. Now I'm going to say something about Rabbi Weinberg, otherwise we will not get there. But I want to go to source number 5, but I'm going to just give you from line 26. Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah.
Should. Where did he live at the end of his life? In Switzerland? Montreux. Have you heard of Montreux?
Yeah.
Good, okay. Now, Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg was born in Lithuania, was a Gaon, a Talmudic giant, and he had a chavruta with Reb Nosson Finkel, okay, in Lithuania, and but he was interested in secular studies. So he went to Germany. Okay, a Litvak went to Germany, and he went to university. He became a little bit trained, and he became the dean of the Hildesheimer Seminary in Berlin. Okay, he was a remarkable scholar, highly respected. But of course, the Shoah, he fled to Switzerland, and he spent his latter years, the last years, in Montreux. He wrote responsa called Sridei Eish, the remnants of the fire, because what he had been able to save from the fire that burned up German Jewry. And he was consulted on many halakhic issues after the war. Okay? They sent letters to Montreux. Now, one of the letters came from England. Now, the National Health has a British Medical Association, has an ethics committee, and the question was, in the 1960s, about rubella. Now, you know what rubella is?
Measles.
German measles. German measles, rubella. How do you say it in Schweizerdeutsch? Reutlin. Reutlin. Did I say it right? Reutlin. Never mind, okay? Once an Englishman, always an Englishman. Reutlin. But what happens if you get, as a pregnant woman, rubella in the early stages of your pregnancy? What? Blind and all sorts of other horrible things.
Yeah.
So the British Medical Association and its ethics committee said every doctor in the national health system has to refer a woman who is in early pregnancy with rubella to an abortion clinic to abort the fetus. If you don't, you'll be struck off, you'll be punished as a non-ethical doctor. Okay, Claudia? Is that clear?
Yes.
Excellent, good. So, you are an Orthodox Jewish doctor, and you've learnt the Mishnah, that you say, this isn't a threat to the mother's life. This is just because you don't want a badly damaged fetus. Are you allowed to kill the fetus because of that? So they sent the question to Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg in Montreux. And Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg wrote a 15-page response to them. So when is Shabbat? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just going to give you the conclusion, but it's very interesting. This we are going to read in total, because then I'm going to compare it to a tshuva at the time of the Liège trial in Belgium. Okay? Another rabbi, but not from the same background, from a different background. Let's have a look. In conclusion, the consensus of rabbinic opinion is that feticide, which means killing a fetus, the consensus, what is consensus in German? Consensus. It's not included in the prohibition on homicide, but it's forbidden on other grounds. Listen carefully. Rabbi Weinberg, Gaon Halacha, says killing a fetus is not murder. There must be some issur, it must be wrong. But we do not know of any definitive prohibition. But I can't tell you what the issur is. I don't know. We all know that you can't kill a fetus unless it is to save the life of the mother. But I can't tell you that there is well-defined offense in Jewish law, in halakha, called killing a fetus. It doesn't exist. We're not Greek, we're not Christian, and we're not Catholic. So this is Hagaon, the Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, okay? Isur she'eneni yodea, okay? It may very well be, however, look, that the source of the prohibition lies in the will of the Torah, Ratzon HaTorah, which is manifested in those laws that protect the value of life in general. Another example of which is cannibalism. Now we'll get really interesting. Eating people. Can you do that? Now, Rabbi Weinberg says that when you want to apply halakha, you have to take into account Ratzon Hashem. Okay? Ratzon HaTorah, line 21. What does the Torah want? Merci, Marcel. What does the Torah want from you? Not only that you look at the law book and you keep the laws and you do what is written that you should do and you don't do what's written that you shouldn't do. Torah requires you to think about something more, a moral aspect, ethical aspect, humane aspect, being a fine person. All that is not written exactly down like in law, but we all know that if there's no derech eretz, there's no Torah. So you need to have something more. And that explains abortion. And this, I think, is the thread right through, who asked me, Michael. This is the Jewish halakhic view. There is a basic understanding that feticide is not a crime, that there is no prohibition that underlies killing a fetus, but we are always sensitive to the morality, and therefore will only kill a fetus if it's really necessary. Okay? Now, Rabbi Weinberg goes on to say, I must emphasize, cannibalism. Are you allowed, say, Claudia, sorry I'm picking on you, but you happen to be in my line of vision, and I thought that you might enjoy it. But this is a sad case. Somebody is told by a doctor that they have to, in order to save their life, they're going to die, either go to the supermarket, the co-op, and buy a kilo of human flesh, or a kilo of pork. What would you go for as an Orthodox halakhic modern Jew?
In the court you go to get
But say you did. We're now in cuckoo land, okay? Say you could buy, without killing anyone, a kilo of human flesh. Okay? Put a little oil, salt, onion.
Usually you could argue common sense over common law.
Thank you. Yeah.
That exactly brings the other me for taking the brain a little bit to decide what to eat if you don't have.
Okay. So what would you as a halakhic Jew go for?
But it was also forbidden for the 7 laws.
Where? No, doesn't say anything about eating them. It only says about killing them. A bar min achai is when you want to take meat from an animal, you have to treat it well. But
But isn't it a better example if you said that, like these people who were in an aeroplane that crashed in the Andes, and in order to survive, they had to
exactly,
eat
sure.
their dead companions.
Yeah. But I'm giving you, see, that's perfectly fine. If you need to save your life under Jewish law, you can eat anything and everything, even pigs' udders. But you have a choice. What would you choose? The pork or the people? What?
No,
You
pork
choose
is
the pork.
asur min Torah.
Marcel says, but it says in the Torah you may not eat pork. Chazir lo tochel. Does it say anywhere in the Torah you cannot eat people?
No,
No, it doesn't.
it doesn't.
I can prove to you, in fact, that you could probably, according to halakha, eat a kilo of people. Why? The rule in halakha is that you cannot eat anything that comes from a non-kosher source. So can you drink the milk of a lioness, say?
No.
Because you can't eat lions. Can you eat bees? Are bees kosher?
Beef?
Bees. They're not kosher. Can you eat honey?
Yeah.
How come? Do you eat honey? You eat honey, but it comes from a non-kosher creature. The answer is, of course, that the honey is made outside of the bee, not inside. Rambam, okay? But now I have Claudia, the $64,000 question. Can you drink human milk from a woman, not from her directly, but again you go into the co-op and you have a liter of human milk? Is it mutar? It is.
In Harvard.
It is, and it's parva too. That means that the mother must also be edible, because it is yotzei. Alright? The mother must be edible because her milk is edible under Jewish law. It's not me, it's the Rishonim on Masechet Chulin, Daf Samach Vav. Okay? Chulin 66, Ramban, Rashba, they all agree. There's no prohibition. What does Rabbi Weinberg say? He says, we will choose to eat pork because the Torah could not possibly want you to stoop so low as to prefer human flesh, which should be treated with dignity and buried, to prefer it to something which is even asur, forbidden according to the Torah. Because above all else, we are required to be mentioned. And mentioned as part of the human family, we do not eat each other's flesh. So Rabbi Weinberg says abortion is the same. Whilst it is true that if you were to look at the halakha as we have, there's no actual positive, full-fledged prohibition. Okay? Nevertheless, we as menschlich Jews would be very careful before we kill a fetus. In this particular case of rubella, says Rabbi Weinberg, I'm going to use another aspect of Jewish law. Over the years, rabbis provided 2 time frames, just as the Supreme Court did in Roe against Wade. 2 time frames. One is 40 days, and one is 3 months. 12 weeks, which reminds me of which legal system says that you must not abortion without medical permission after the 12th week. Which country?
Switzerland.
Switzerland. Exactly. Switzerland and the rabbis, one and the same thing. You always knew the rabbinical tradition was Swiss. 12 weeks, this is the Swiss criminal code, this is practice. There was a referendum in 2002, it's no longer criminalized, but we say before 12 weeks we'll take into account a mother's stress. After 12 weeks it should be threat to the mother's health or a severely damaged fetus. So Rabbi Weinberg reflects in a way Swiss law, although it wasn't in place when he made this decision. And he says that we use the 40-day criteria and the 3-month criterion, 12 weeks, the first trimester, okay? And we say that up until then, you can expand the threat to the mother's life and you can include a severely deformed fetus. By the way, a more radical decision was given by Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg. It sits Eliezer. Rabbi Waldenberg says, in relation to a disease called Tay-Sachs, which type of Jews suffer or might suffer? Ashkenazim from a certain area in Eastern Europe. Swiss are okay. But if your ancestors hail from the Grodno area, you should be tested before you marry another carrier. If 2 carriers mate, what's the chance of having a very sick child? 25%. Genetics. Test. Now, if 2 carriers mate, 25% chance. Rabbi Waldenberg was asked about abortion. Because a baby born with Tay-Sachs will begin to retard physically and mentally, will be sick, and will die before the age of 5. There is no cure. Absolutely no cure. So should the parents have to stand by and suffer, and the child will suffer, Rabbi Waldenberg follows a long line of precedents and says, we can, if we follow 40 days, 3 months, and 7 months, but since Eliezer 7 months, we're allowed to, again, for a very good reason, we want to prevent a very severely damaged fetus from developing into a child who is only going to cause grief will suffer, will have no life. It's a value judgment. It's a call. But still, halakha has room for it. But I need to go to Antwerp, to Rabbi Moshe Yonah Tzveig. I'm going to have to do that though, otherwise, but I will not forget.
And a small question.
A small question is the answer short.
So why does the Slide Esh not relate to the Noachide laws that you mentioned at the beginning, that Noachides are not allowed to do killing the
Because the Tosafot say, unless it is a threat to the mother's life. And Weinberg and Waldenberg say, what? Their threat is not only physical, threat is mental. And in fact, a mental threat can be more serious, Michael, than a physical one. You're faced with a type of life that you cannot support. May your marriage may collapse, your existing children suffer. It's not...
Is there a right not to suffer?
We do try to prevent suffering, yes. We do try to prevent suffering. This would be regarded as Ratzon HaTorah, across the board. Shalom Bayit, supporting people, just as you would not accept cannibalism because of something about the way human beings need to be. I think it would be very cruel to say, well, people should suffer or ought to suffer.
Do you know
or they deserve to suffer.
You know the Exit organization in Switzerland?
That is something else. That is a physician-assisted suicide.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is dealing with a full person. So whether you are allowed as a fully born individual to say my life is full of suffering and therefore I want to have it ended, but I will do it myself. Under Swiss law, you cannot, as a physician, kill anyone, but you can provide them with the means of them committing suicide. That is clearly different to abortion. I'm afraid you've had one question, I have to move on.
Question.
Sorry?
Where do the 40 days and the 3 months come from?
Yes. Okay, you want to know where they come from. Well, Chavat Yair Siman Lamed Aleph. I mean, we're on page 2. There's a tshuva of the Chavat Yair. Rabbi Yair Chaim Bachrach lived from 1639 to 1702, wrote Chava's Yoir, after his grandmother Chava, whom he greatly respected and admired. He was a rabbi in Worms. Now, I haven't printed the whole tshuva. He says that basically under Torah law, there's no problem, but there is a moral issue. And then he goes on to cite a view. Now, the 40 days and the 3 months come from 2 different areas of Jewish law. Very briefly, and you'll have to either send me a mail or ask me on Shabbat. They are to do with the laws of a Kohen and a Bat Kohen. If a daughter of a Kohen marries a regular Israelite and she becomes pregnant, then at a certain stage she can no longer eat, and she's divorced, she can't go back and eat truma in her father's house. Okay? That's the din. And what fixes that? How do we know, by the way, when 40 days have passed? How did they know in the past? It was a guess. They didn't. Aristotle uses 40 days too. The Torah uses 40 days in relation to Tumat Leida. Okay? Yeah. It's 40 days for a male, 80 days. How does the Torah know how long it takes for a male fetus to be formed? He's quicker than a female fetus because he's more form and less matter. Further commentary, 3 months is from the same area of halakha, and they were transposed, they were taken from these other areas of halakha and put into the abortion question because abortion came up in the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries in relation to what? A mamzer fetus. Can you abort a mamzer fetus? The answer is, it's a machloket, a dispute, but according to Rabbi Jacob Emden you can, according to Rabbi Yair Bachrach you can't, and according to Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg and Rabbi Waldenberg you can abort a fetus that's severely damaged. But look at Rabbi Moshe Yonah Tzveig, a Belzer Chassid who survived the Shoah, came the Rabbi of Machzikia Das in Antwerp. Now what does he say? I'm going to read this in English. Turn to page 3. According to the majority of Rishonim, although a fetus is not considered a nefesh, Line 4, abortion is only permitted if the continuation of the pregnancy poses a direct threat to the mother's life, since in other cases it may be prohibited for various reasons. In other words, Rabbi Zweig is much frummer. He's not a Litvak who ended up in the Hildesheimer Seminary. He's a Belgian Cossack who survived the war and ended up in Belgium, in Antwerp. So he says, we certainly can only abort if it's a direct threat to the mother's life. I don't know what the Haredim in Zurich would say, but is it only a direct threat to the mother's life that allows an abortion? Moreover, and this is very interesting, I'd like somebody to read. Sarah, would you like to read from Moreover, line 7 on page 3?
Moreover, it is not only leading physicians and jurists who oppose abortion in this type
There was a big case in Belgium where the Catholics, including physicians and lawyers, came out against abortion where the pregnant woman was diagnosed with rubella, okay? They said you cannot kill the fetus in such a case. But in addition to them, what do we read?
The Catholic priesthood too, and the one who stands at its head have also...
Who is he?
Pope.
The Pope. Okay, Rabbi Zweig doesn't want to say the Pope because he's not our father after all. So he said, Misha Omed Barosho, the one who stands at the head of the church. Okay.
Have also issued public statements condemning feticide in order to prevent the birth of a severely deformed child. As a result, there is yet another prohibition involved in ruling leniently in the present case, i.e. the profanation of the divine name.
And how would we say that in Hebrew? Deb?
Chilul Hashem.
Chilul Hashem. Okay. So Chilul Hashem, we must not be seen to be less moral than the Catholics. Now there you are, interesting argument. Used by rabbis in North America all the time because we need Catholic support on issues, so we'll support them, they will support us. Aguda has always been against abortion, whereas the RCA, modern Orthodoxy, will say there are cases in which it is permitted to abort. But the argument used then by rabbis such as Zweig is the argument of Chilul Hashem. We cannot be seen to be less moral than the most moral Christians. But are they the most moral Christians when they sacrifice the mother and will refuse to kill the fetus? Are they, Claudia? I leave that to you to think about, okay, when you drive to the airport next. Nothing in relation to the present case. Read on, please. Sarah.
Nothing in relation to the present issue can be considered a private matter, since any lenient halakhic ruling in this area will immediately become a matter of public knowledge.
Now, Rabbi Zweig is very canny, very cluey. He says, today we can't hide anything. If the Orthodox rabbis come out and say it's okay to abort to prevent the birth of a seriously deformed child, it'll be splashed over all the newspapers, all over Europe, including Zurich, okay? So we have to be careful not to do that. Is this a halakhic issue? Is this a political issue? And this, I think, is a fine illustration. It's time for me to stop, I know. A fine illustration of the fact that in the Jewish position, we have a tension. It's not clear. It's grey area. On the one hand, we know that in the halakha, fetus is not a nefesh. That when the mother's life is in direct danger, we can kill the fetus even during birth. We also know that we have an understanding of the value of human life. And we know that there's a slippery slope. Kill a fetus, kill a young child, kill a person, kill a whole group of people who are different to you. So we have to be careful, and we try to be careful. But at the same time, technology has given us the ability to prevent suffering coming into the world. And so we can diagnose today, it used to take a long time in the past, to discover, for example, the Tay-Sachs gene. Now you can do it almost immediately. So we know we can take measures. Do we need to? Do we have to? Rambam says, halakha ve'en morin ken. We consult, talk to the parents, and see and evaluate the situation. That is what a sensitive and halakhic rabbi should do. But do we go beyond that? Are we going to say, have an abortion so your slalom ski will improve? Or I want to do tennis and the fetus will get in the way? Clearly not. So we have a refined position that gives you a little scope. We're not the Catholic Church, who says I have to be safe, so no abortions, and I have the tradition that comes from a wrongful translation of the Old Testament, but that's my position. And we are not a libertarian approach that says anything that anybody wants they should do, because this is a living entity and being after all. So we, as always, I think as Jews always have, we have the hard road. The hard road that requires deep thought, that requires sophisticated distinctions to be made. And I think that the halacha on abortion is a very good example of this, I think, highly positive Jewish approach that doesn't allow easy solutions and always poses challenges for us. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Brooking to you.
May I ask a question?
Now is the time to ask.
Okay. You told us about Peter and Heidi.
He's a Japanese.
And Peter obviously was born. He's an adult person. He came out of the womb of his mother. And the grandfather is allowed to kill him before he kills Heidi.
Who is totally innocent.
Totally innocent.
Totally innocent. Right. Okay.
Now, I don't understand the difference. You asked Yeshua, where is it?
He's gone.
He's gone. Over there. If the baby is half the way out, why aren't you allowed to kill him, even if it's completely out? Because the mother's life is in danger, she's going to die.
Absolutely.
And even if he's out, he's okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that takes us back to the heart of the matter. Okay? Rambam, and this is only Rambam, you appreciate that, okay? Rambam says that I want more than just the fetus as a non-nefesh to justify killing the fetus. But I need two things. I am not prepared to sacrifice the principle that every human life is absolutely a whole universe, as it says at the end of the Spielberg film, okay? He who saves one life is as though he has saved the entire world. So, I'm going to use two things. And this is the Rambam's creation. He says, I'm going to say that if we're dealing with a fetus, I have to find some way of saying it is more than just being a fetus that justifies killing the fetus to save the mother. I want more. It's just the Rambam, as Rabbi Weinberg said. I don't have to follow Rambam because, as you saw here, he's not accepted by the majority of poskim. But the Rambam clearly wanted to do more because the Rambam has a very wide view. I mean, he was the greatest physician, and scientist, and person who was intimately involved with secular philosophy. He was speaking to a very sophisticated audience. So he looks for a sophisticated way. He says there must be something more than just being a fetus. And that is, he in fact says what we said originally about the Mishnah. Why does the Mishnah tell us about a fetus? Only when it comes to a clash between the mother's life and the life of the fetus. The Mishnah could have simply said, Ubar alav nefeshu. A fetus is not a nefesh, and left it at that. But it didn't. It said, where do I learn that a fetus is not a nefesh in a case where the mother's life is under threat? So therefore there must be something about the mother's life being under threat. The odd thing about the Rambam is that the threat to the mother's life comes from a fetus who has no intention to kill the mother, okay? But still, the fetus is a fetus, and it is threatening the mother's life. If it stays where it is, both of them will die. If you can cut up the fetus and take it out, you have a chance of saving the mother's life. And that's the Rambam's very sophisticated. Well, the Rambam is looking for a way, as lawyers do, a new way of explaining what the Mishnah did not make clear. The Mishnah, as I said, gives us a scenario, a scene. The mother's life is in danger because the fetus cannot get out, so there'll be sepsis, blood poisoning, and they'll both die. Rashi says, why do you kill the fetus? Because clearly the mother and the fetus needs to be killed and the mother needs to be saved. Rambam says that's not enough. I need you to say more. And the more is, this is a case which is kirodef, like a rodef. Okay, Michael, you're going to have to settle for that this evening. Are there any more? Then we will, I think, with Sarah's permission, let everybody go. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to another couple of sessions. Have a very good night. Schön